And I will introduce our team, but okay. So a little bit of housekeeping. Again, we're recording this already, and the recording for this will be on our website shortly, probably in maybe the next couple of days. And we're going to go through the presentation, and you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. We will have one or two people following those along and either ask them during the session or towards the end. But please give your name and affiliation so we kind of can keep track. I also, if you can go to the next slide, Amy, because my thing's not working. So again, we're doing this acquisition workshop today. This afternoon, we're doing one on park development projects. That also will be recorded. But if you have an interest in that funding as well, we invite you to join us then. So these workshops today will cover the application process. But then on December 13th and January 17th, we'll have a sort of a drop-in open house Q&A thing. If you're working on your application and you have a question and you want to hear other people's questions, that I always find that to be very helpful to hear what other people are asking. You're welcome to do that. But I do want to stress that we are here to answer your questions all the time. I mean, whenever you need us, please call us. There's a contact us page on our website that lists the project managers who handle the projects in your particular area, whether acquisition or park development. And so you're welcome to reach out to them at any time to ask questions about your specific project. Okay, next slide, Amy. Okay, so our team. So on behalf of Elizabeth Dragon, she's our Assistant Commissioner for Community Investment and Economic Revitalization. Green Acres is part of that organization. She welcomes you. She was not able to attend today. But again, I am Martha Sapp. I'm the Director of Green Acres. The presentation will be given primarily by Cecile Murphy, who is our Chief of Local and Nonprofit Assistance. And behind the scenes is Amy Simoski, one of our project managers for Green Acres. But I also want you to know that almost all of the Green Acres team is on here as well. If you can mute, please. I'm hearing someone giving the phone number. But our project managers are on the line as well, in the meeting as well. So they'll be hearing things, and if you have specific questions, they might be able to pipe in and answer the questions if it's about your particular project. But again, we'll have a time for questions and answers at the end, but please put your questions in the chat so we don't lose track of any. And I'm not seeing if everyone is seeing the transcript. I find that to be stressful. It's typing everything I say. So we're excited to have you today. We tried to give extra time for the application round this year, announcing it in October, and it's due in February, which Cecile will get into. But again, we are here to help you. We want you to have the best possible project. We want you to have the best possible chance of getting awards. We want to give you money, and that's what we're here for. We want your projects to succeed. And so the goal of these workshops is so that your application, your project is really good and your application is well done, so that it can all move smoothly through the process and we can get to hopefully approval. And then ribbon cuttings, we love all those things. So I will now turn the presentation over to Cecile Murphy.
Hi, welcome everybody. As Martha said, my name is Cecile and I am the Chief of the Local and Nonprofit Assistance Program. Just to give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to give an overview of the land acquisition and urban parks programs. Urban parks is a different pot of money that we administer, and land acquisitions are one of the eligible types of projects for urban parks. I'm also going to highlight some application requirements and some tips for submitting your application, and of course, answer your questions. This is a chart that shows all of our 2024 funding round programs. All of this information that I'm going to say today, including all of the charts, are in the application packages. So, don't feel like you need to screenshot it or anything. It's all in there. And again, what we're talking about today is land acquisition, which is under the traditional Green Acres program, and it's also under the Urban Parks program. I want to just note that when I talk about the acquisitions today, I'm going to be talking about both of those at the same time, unless I specify otherwise. The primary difference between the Green Acres and the urban parks is the eligibility, who is eligible to apply and where. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Applicants can submit one application to each of the program areas. So you can submit an application to the traditional Green Acres, the stewardship, the Jake's Law, and the urban parks, depending on what type of applicant you are. And you can see from the eligibility notes that some of the programs are for governments only. Some of them are for governments and nonprofits, and some of them have more specific eligibility requirements. We strongly encourage you to keep in mind your administrative capacity when you're trying to decide how many projects to apply for. Our applications are, they're hefty. They're not the easiest things to submit. But what's really a challenge is administering the projects once you get them going. So we want everyone to make sure that they're going to apply for the number of projects that they have the staff to administer. Okay. So on this slide is the official definition of the types of projects we can fund that are acquisition projects. It's, all about recreation and conservation. And so basically you can buy land that will be used for conservation or outdoor recreation. I have to stress that because our money is not for use as indoor recreation. So we can't fund a piece of property that you're going to put indoor tennis courts on, for example. The property, in order to draw down Green Acres funding, it has to have clear title. It has to be environmentally clean. And once you buy it, it has to be open to the public without discrimination based on residency or anything else. The Urban Parks program includes a strong historic component. So the purchase of historic sites, which is eligible in Green Acres under certain circumstance, is always eligible under Urban Parks. Okay, some additional information about site eligibility. DEP and our program in particular really encourages the brownfields to greenfields movement, which is the purchasing and remediating contaminated sites and turning them into parks. We can pay for site investigation, preliminary assessment reports, site investigation reports, things like that. But unfortunately, Green Acres funding can't be used for remediation. There are other pots of money for that. We, however, will hold your money as long as remediation is moving forward. We recognize that some of these sites are more complicated and take longer to acquire, and we are patient with our applicants as long as things, like I said, are moving. If you were buying a site that has a structure on it, you could keep the structure if it's going to support outdoor recreation. And what that means is that you can use it for things like restrooms, concession stands, storage, anything that's directly supporting the outdoor recreation on the site. The other option is to demolish the structure. That is only true for non-historic structures as determined by our state historic preservation office. So all structures have to be reviewed by them. We encourage you to look at site suitability. You want to know right up front if there are any limits on possible future uses, particularly if you're buying the site for active rec. It's really good to know what permits are going to be required up front so that you know you don't run into problems later. You bought a site thinking you were going to put a big athletic complex on it, and only to find out that that's not going to be allowed through regulations. So we encourage you to look into that in detail. And our project reference map is one of our application requirements, which gives you some of the information you need to get that sort of assessment of your site suitability. And just a quick rundown of some of the ineligible properties. We don't fund the COA designated sites. So if the site is designated for future affordable housing, we don't fund that. We also don't fund preserve sites. So if it's on a recreation and open space inventory or it's otherwise preserved, we don't fund it. And we don't fund land that's within road right-of-ways or that is state claimed tidelands property. Those can be part of an acquisition, but they won't get reimbursement funding from Green Acres. Okay, so what will we pay for? We will cover all the costs necessary to acquire the property, except for, again, remediation and a few others that are listed in the application. We'll cover the land cost based on our certified market value, which is a result of the appraisal process. We'll cover technical costs. Amy, what's going on? I liked the picture of your boys. That was awesome. Okay, we'll cover technical report costs. So if you're, because you're required to do appraisals, the preliminary assessment report, sometimes a site investigation report is required, title report, and the survey. So the costs of those are included in what we reimburse for. Incidental costs such as legal, engineering, financial, those are also eligible up to a cap. And then there are site-specific expenses that, may apply to your acquisition that are also eligible. So demolition, again, after the State Historic Preservation Office has reviewed it. Tenant relocation is sometimes an issue. Condemnation, if you're a local government and you've decided that that's the best way to go, we will cover additional costs. But there are limits to that, so double check that, get all the details from your project manager on that one. Okay, so this chart gives grant percentages for different types of acquisitions. And again, this one's in the application package. So to figure out the grant percentage for your particular project, you first need to figure out what category applicant are you. There are definitions in the application, in the definition section, and there are lists in the appendices of these different types of communities. So the first two types of acquisitions are they're only eligible to local governments who have passed an open space tax. The planning incentives are, you also have to have a open space tax or plan in order to be eligible for that. And basically the planning incentive program is for communities that want to apply once for a bunch of properties instead of submitting different applications for different properties, and then have the flexibility to pursue them under that one application. The site-specific incentive is a higher grant percentage, but again, you do have to apply for one property at a time. The standard acquisition is if you don't have a tax and you don't have a plan and you just want to buy this one piece of property in your town or in your project area, and you're not an urban aid municipality. The urban aid municipalities are those designated by the Department of Community Affairs, and the list again is in the back of the application. If you are not an urban aid municipality and you want to apply, so it's a 25% grant in that situation. Urban aid municipalities are a 75% grant, and then you can see this extra column. Well, I do want to point out that nonprofit acquisitions are always 50% by statute. So if you're a nonprofit, there's no confusion. It's always 50%. It's a little more complicated for local governments because we do give preferential funding for projects that benefit environmental justice communities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So we give higher grant percentages for Green Acres projects. So that's that first category, traditional Green Acres projects located in or easily accessible from an overburdened community subject to adverse cumulative stressors. And that is a mouthful. So we like to shorten it by calling them ACS OBCs. You may recall if you came to our last year's presentation or applied last year that we were using a different term, adversely stressed OBCs. That was a term we made up because there wasn't one yet. The EJ office has since made up or, designated these communities with this particular name, the overburdened communities subject to adverse cumulative stressors. So we are now using that same name as well. It's the same definition, though, that we used in our last funding round. It's an increase of 25%, and it's just Green Acres acquisition and park development projects. So what this means is, for example, if you were going to submit a standard acquisition application, but it was located within one of those ACS OBCs, then it would be eligible for 50% instead of 25% grant funding. Easily accessible means less than a quarter mile away with no barriers to pedestrian access. So no highways in the way, no impassable waterways, things like that. And it's quarter mile, it's not as the crow flies, it's a quarter mile GIS mapped walking distance. So the actual path somebody would walk from the ACS OBC to the project site. There are definitions in our application, and there's a lot more information on the department's Environmental Justice Office website, and the links to that are in the back of the application under the helpful links. Okay, this is the same chart I just showed you. I'm circling back to it just to talk about, so you can see here, the standard acquisition is a project not located in urban aid, and it's 25% under the standard acquisition column. But if you go to the ACS OBC column, now it's 50%. So that's how to tell that. Now, how do you figure out if your project is in an ACS OBC? It's a two-part process. The first part, or the first step, is you need to figure out, where you need to look at the municipality that is the site of your project location and figure out whether that municipality even has any ACS OBCs. There are over 200 municipalities in New Jersey that do, so it's not a small number. The list of all of those municipalities is in the back of our Green Acres applications. Now, I do want to point out that that list has changed from last year. The Environmental Justice Office updates that list annually, I believe, and it has updated it since our last application. So there, some towns have been added on, some towns have dropped off. So even if you knew the status last year, you might want to just double check the list this year. So that's the first step. And then the second step is if the project is located in a municipality that contains one, you have to figure out whether the project is exactly located in or easily accessible from the ACS OBC. And there are instructions in the appendices, very detailed step-by-step. I call them my dummy instructions, because they're very helpful for those of us who are not super technologically advanced. So you can look up the particular location of your proposed project and see, and the instructions tell you how you can figure out if it's in an ACS OBC. And of course, you can always call us and we can walk you through it as well. All right, so in addition to grants, you can also apply for loan funding for the match requirement. Loan funds are provided at 2% interest over 30 years, except for urban aid projects that are eligible for a 0% interest loan. The application package gives us a lot more information about matches and includes a bunch of links to possible sources of matching funds at the back in the helpful links section.
Hey, Cece, I have to cut in for just a second. My slideshow dropped out where I was watching you advance slides. So you're going to just have to let me know when to advance.
Okay, sure.
Sorry.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I just want to highlight some differences in the urban parks projects. The main difference, again, is the eligible applicants. We have a real particular environmental justice focus in our urban parks program. We're trying to really reach the hardest hit areas. And you know what? I don't think I really explained. I wanted to, sorry, just to backtrack a little bit. Those ACS OBCs are areas, they're census blocks, so they're not entire municipalities, they're just census blocks. And those are census blocks that have been identified as having a greater than average proportion or of environmental stressors, environmental and public health stressors. So things like air pollution sources, solid waste facilities, things like that. And so that's why they are EJ communities. I'm sorry, I didn't clarify earlier. Okay, so the projects for the the urban parks projects must be located in or easily accessible from, again, an overburdened community subject to adverse cumulative stressors. But in this case, that ACS OBC must be located within an urban aid municipality. So the only eligible applicants for our urban parks program are either urban aid municipalities or county governments that are applying to do a project that's in an urban aid municipality in an overburdened community subject to adverse cumulative stressors. It's 100% grant funding for all of the projects through urban parks. And when you apply to urban parks, you can actually request that if your application is unsuccessful, like it doesn't get any money, or if it's underfunded, you get some money but not enough, you can request that the application is rolled over into the Green Acres round. In other words, you can submit the same project to both programs, to Urban Parks and Green Acres. The Green Acres submission then counts as your one Green Acres request. And there's 2 extra submissions if you're rolling over an Urban Parks project. They are the recreation and open space inventory must be submitted, and there's a second enabling resolution for the Green Acres request. And just a reminder, as with our other projects, meaningful public access must be provided to the public, to the project site. Okay, Amy. All right, so funding percentages tell you part of the story, but unfortunately we don't have all the money in the world that we wish we had. We're blessed with the amount of money we do have, but it's not everything. So they don't tell the whole story of how much money you'll receive. Since demand for our funding virtually always exceeds supply, our awards are capped. And this definitely affects our more expensive projects that may receive less than they're eligible for. The caps for Urban Parks project is $500,000. Very easy, simple. The Green Acres cap is based on applicant type, and we don't have exact numbers at this stage of the game. We develop them once we see what all the demand is for the money. Amy, so this chart shows the caps from the last 3 funding rounds, with the highest numbers were awarded in the most recent round. We'd like to award that figure again this round, but it looks like we're going to have a little less money than we had, so we're not sure that we'll be able to. But it is very unlikely that we would make, I mean, virtually not likely at all, that we would make an award outside the range given. So you can use these figures for planning purposes when you're trying to, figure out how much is likely to come your way for a project. Just one more note at the bottom, you'll see asterisks for the nonprofit sections. That's because we are blessed, and this round we have a good amount of nonprofit money, and we're really hoping that we will be able to give larger awards to our nonprofit applicants. So, as things move along, maybe we don't know exactly how much at this point, but you can always check back with us and see if there's been any developments where we've gotten a clearer idea of what the numbers will be. Unfortunately, it probably will depend on demand, which we won't know until the application round is closed, but you're always welcome to call us and check in. Okay, so now that we've covered eligibility and funding information, now I'm going to highlight some of our application requirements and talk about some tips to help you submit a successful application.
Cecile?
Yes.
Just want to let you know, there are some questions in the chat, and I don't know whether you want to go through them now before you move on to the application portion.
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, let's do them now.
First one was, do greenhouses count as indoor recreation?
Greenhouses as indoor recreation.
I think it was when you were talking about structures that could be allowed, and this would be in support of.
I think, that is one of those questions where the devil's in the details. I know there are permanent greenhouses, and then there are hoop houses that, you know, get uncovered and recovered based on the season. I think that is one of those questions that we would want more information and to get sort of down into those details I talked about. So what I would suggest would be to email the details to your project manager, and I'll by the end of the presentation, I'll give you the information on how to figure out who that is.
Okay. And then what qualifies as a financial incidental cost? It's a long list of things. Okay.
Right. The one I've seen most often is the cost of floating bonds, short-term financing for the projects. That's the one that most often is submitted. You know, there are expenses related to issuing bonds and or the short-term financing instruments. So those are the ones that I see most often.
And someone pointed out that the updated ACSOBC list is available on the back of the current Green Acres application. Although there's a question mark there, so I'm not sure what the question is. But yes, the
Yes.
application does have the updated list. And then can someone explain how urban parks is different from other categories?
That's a good question. The Green Acres program, including most of everything we fund, is funded through the corporate business tax under a public referendum that was approved by the voters. Urban Parks is a separate funding source that comes directly from the budget. It's a budgetary set aside. And so that money is subject to slightly different restrictions on it than the Green Acres money, which is governed by statute. And so that's why there's this separate category. As I said, it's really, we administer the urban parks projects very similar to how we administer our normal Green Acres projects, but there are slight differences.
Okay, that's it for now. You want to keep going?
Sure. Okay, so the number one requirement we wanted to highlight this year is public engagement. We actually, hopefully some of you or all of you received these emails. We sent out emails months ago, just giving folks a heads up that now the summer would be a great time to start your public engagement for your new applications. It's, what we're saying is, let's involve the public during the planning process of our projects. So we're not just telling folks about our plans, we're asking for their input while we make them. This, helps them. It helps residents have an input on how their tax dollars are spent. And it also helps you have better projects, ones that are really supported by the community and that match the needs and the priorities of the community. And our experience has really shown that if you don't involve the public early on, it could lead to situations where a project is approved by Green Acres and then public awareness grows. And sometimes the public doesn't support it. And then public opposition at that point can tank the project. And that is a waste of everybody's time and money, particularly the applicants. So there's lots of reasons why we want to encourage public engagement, and that's one of the things that's a requirement now of our programs. The it's a little different. It's a little more clear cut for park development projects than it is for acquisition projects, but it's still important because somebody might not feel as excited about buying a corner lot that's just going to be mowed once a year. They might want some other property in their community to be more of a priority. So we are, particularly with acquisition projects, we really are leaving it up to the applicant to figure out what methods and that will most effectively engage your community and get the kind of input that you need to make a good decision about your acquisition priorities. These are a list of ideas about how to solicit public input. It's also in the application package. It ranges from the pretty basic all the way up to the rather intensive. And you know, again, we're leaving it up to you to figure out what works best for you and, you know, and also what works best given your community circumstances and the people who live there.
We're getting a lot of
Okay.
questions. This is a good part. Are we still on public? Is the next slide still public engagement? Because it might prompt more
Yes, it
questions.
is, but
Okay, we'll do one more.
we can
We'll
go
finish-
ahead and, okay, well, all right.
Okay, yeah.
So, this is a silly slide, but we had a lot of confusion last round about our public engagement requirement. It was new in 2020 for the 2023 round. That was the first time we required it. And I feel like we weren't maybe as clear as we could have been. So trying to be super clear that the public hearing that is a required part of all Green Acres projects and urban parks projects is not the same as public engagement. It does not fulfill the requirements. We're asking you to do public engagement during the planning process, and we're asking you to do a public hearing before the application is submitted. So they're two separate requirements. And I just want that to be super clear. So, all right, what are the questions?
Okay, just to put, not to put too fine a point on it, the public hearing it has always been, you're telling them what you've decided. And
Mhm.
we've learned over many years that people, that's kind of too late for the public to have any input whatsoever. You're at the last minute, you're not going to change things. So, and believe me, we hear about it from the residents that they didn't know about these things. So the question, if a municipality or nonprofit has received funding for a project in the past, but less than 50% of the certified market value, and wants to ask for more in this round, do they need to meet the expanded requirements for public engagement? This is basically a supplemental funding request.
Right.
So,
And no, we do not require public engagement for a supplemental funding request.
next one
And I'll
is
talk
do
a little
not,
bit more about those towards the end of the presentation.
okay, do nonprofits need public engagement for acquisition?
Yes, everybody. And it could, your public engagement could be your particular, your constituents, you know, the people who donate to you, the people who are involved and come to your meetings or come to your events. It doesn't have to be, you know, a public meeting like a municipality would have, but some sort of public engagement. You can put something on your website and say, you know, this, we're, you know, these are our plans. And if you don't want to, you know, if there are political reasons why you don't want to put the exact property you're purchasing, you could, you know, put the criteria you're using to select. You know, just sharing some information about why you're buying what you're buying is what we're looking for. And then the public having an opportunity to comment on that.
Yeah, and also asking them, where do you think we should buy something? You know, what
Right.
areas of our service area do you think need open space? So again, it's asking them what they think, because this is public funding, even through a private nonprofit, it's public funding, and we want the public to have a say. And I mean, you ultimately decide what you're applying for, but we would like them to have a say, and maybe they can, you know, bring up alternatives that you hadn't thought about. And we do understand that, as Cecile said, that there are reasons you don't want to necessarily say what specific properties you're thinking about, because that also hurts you with negotiation. But it just
Right.
can't be stealth. You know, again, it's what areas do you want? What kind of open space do you want? Those things. If we had public hearings for our open space plan, when that was developed and adopted, do we need to solicit more public input related to this funding round application? Again, this sounds like it's supplemental funding for a planning incentive project, so.
Okay, yes, and if it is indeed a supplemental funding for a public, for a planning incentive project, no. If it isn't and you have a plan and you don't have a tax, but you keep asking for money for different properties in that plan, then it would depend when you did your public hearings. Like if you did them 3 months ago, fine. If you did them 5 years ago, then some public engagement would be appropriate at that point.
This is to help you in the long run too.
Right.
Okay, this one is, at the end of this presentation, can you explain what you meant before about rolling urban parks into a Green Acres application? Not sure what that means, if they are different programs. Thank you. And so we can have that towards the end. So.
Okay, just remind me, I'll forget.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so another one, as I just talked about, of our requirements has always been the public hearing. We've had a lot of questions about our requirements over the years. We're trying to, as of last round, we're trying to be really explicit about everything so that nobody's in the dark. These are, some of the requirements that are highlighted in the application. There's a whole checklist for the public hearing, so which should spell most things out. And I do want to point out that there's a tips section in the application package that talks, it's separate tips for each of the deliverables, each of the submissions. So that's also a really good source for answers to your questions. And of course, there's always us, and we are happy to answer any questions. These are the requirements for the public hearing notice. And the next slide are the requirements for the public hearing itself and the minutes, the meeting minutes. I'm not going to go over each of them. They're in the application again, but just a few notes that we get this question a lot. So we're saying that the public hearing has to be 6 p.m. or later. We get a lot of questions. Well, our meetings are at 5 o'clock. That's fine. You can have the meeting at 5 o'clock, but the public hearing itself should start at 6. And all you have to do is put both times in the public notice. You can say our meeting starts at 5, the public hearing on this particular matter will start at 6 p.m. The transcripts are fine. If you don't do meeting minutes, some local governments do transcripts. That's fine. You can submit those, but no video or audio submissions. I'm sure they're gripping, but we're always crazed at this time of year, and taking an hour to watch a video is not, unfortunately, in our abilities. For urban parks, if you are doing the rollover request that I'll talk about again at the end, if I remember, you need to have a specific discussion about that. You need to say, okay, well, we're applying to urban parks and we're applying for additional money through Green Acres. So that's just a note about that. Okay, next slide. The enabling resolution is also required for all applications. We strongly urge you to use the template without changes. Our lawyers are very fond of the wording in the enabling resolution, and so we don't want to see major changes. The amounts in the resolution need to equal the request amounts, which is, those amounts. So the resolution amounts should match the amounts in the cost estimate, which should match the amount requested in the application form. Sometimes people will do the enabling resolution first and then finish their application, and the cost estimate comes in a little higher and they ask for more. In that situation where there's a discrepancy, we will always use the amount in the resolution because that's the amount that the governing body voted on. Match amounts, if it's a loan, or if you're not requesting a loan, you can just put the request for the loan amount as 0. For matches, if it's a 100% grant project, it should be listed as 0, but otherwise the match figure must equal the total project cost from the cost estimate and the application form minus the funding request. So it's the match is, we are making up the difference between what we anticipate the project will cost and what we anticipate you will give us and what we're asking for. The urban parks, again, 2 resolutions if you want it rolled over, otherwise just the 1. And the Green Acres resolution should list the amount requested, assuming that you get nothing from urban parks. So it's like, it's the pessimistic enabling resolution. We think we're getting nothing from urban parks, so we're going to ask, the resolution says the entire amount you'd want to get from Green Acres. These can be very confusing, and I completely acknowledge that, which is why we have in red that we are so happy to review draft resolutions. We do it all the time. It is much better for us to help you out in the front end and let you know, what needs to be changed before the resolution is passed than to work with a resolution that is inaccurate or wrong. So please do not hesitate to ask your project manager contact to check out your resolution before you submit it. Okay. Next, ranking. Okay, we love it when we can fund all of our eligible projects, which every once in a while we can, but when unfortunately a lot of times we do have to, when demand exceeds funding, available funding, then our programs can get quite competitive. There's projects that get funded or don't get funded just because of 1 point in the ranking. So we want you to be successful, and there's a whole section in our application, how to submit a successful application. And there in that section, we outlined our priorities, which are listed here. And we've included suggestions on how to design your project to incorporate them. Our project managers are also happy to give guidance on these issues, and the degree to which a given project incorporates these priorities will vary just based on the type of project it is, but higher ranking projects will be those that are most consistent with these priorities. And again, there's more information in our application. Okay, we, in order to be ranked and compete for funding, applications must first pass the eligibility test. You have to be eligible. The application package lists all the different circumstances that can lead to an application being disqualified. We've talked about a few today already, and I've highlighted a few more on the slide based on problems we often see. The signatures are really important, as are the public hearing requirements. And projects that are too far along are also not eligible. So if you have a signed contract with the landowner and you didn't get what's called an at-risk authorization from Green Acres ahead of time, then that acquisition is not eligible for funding. We want you to be successful, and our goal is that none of your applications are disqualified. So please read the information carefully. Any questions, reach out to us. And that's kind of our worst case scenario. So let's work together to make sure it doesn't happen. Okay, supplemental funding requests. A lot of you probably have projects you want more money for. They're open projects. And so open acquisition, park development projects, stewardship projects, there are forms on our website in the application section for supplemental funding requests. Now there's 2 different versions, so be sure to pick the right one. There's one for acquisitions and one for other projects. Also, so you can see, in addition to the form itself, there are some attachments that are required. Be sure to pick the right forms for these as well, because the enabling resolution and the nonprofit certification form, both of those are different versions for the supplemental funding than they are for the normal applications. And as a note, urban park projects are not eligible for additional funding from the urban parks pot of money. But if you have an urban parks project that's underfunded, you can talk to your Green Acres project manager about submitting a supplemental funding request to the Green Acres pot of money. So that's a good thing to, again, reach out to your project manager and have a discussion about that. Okay, application submission. So applicants have to submit a complete application by the deadline, which is February 7th, or the supplemental funding requests are also the same deadline. If there's a submissions checklist that you have to fill out that has all of the things you need to submit. If that checklist doesn't specifically call out an item as possibly not applicable or as optional, it must be submitted for the application to be complete. And all applications have to be submitted by the deadline, and that includes public hearing minutes. This last round, we tightened that up, but in previous rounds, we were more flexible. But now you have to submit the public hearing minutes with your application in order for the application to be eligible. Knowing this, it's a good idea to work backwards to figure out when your governing body is meeting, and then figure out when everything else must be done to be ready for that meeting. And I know you know this, it's just a reminder. So our goal has been, in tightening the timeframes and our requirements, has been to have a shorter application approval timeline. And the good news is The last round, we had the shortest application review ever, and it was less than half the time than it was the year before. So it's working, and that's great. We're really happy about that. Next slide. Okay, so we are going to ask folks again this round to submit applications through our website. We'll have an application portal. It's going to look like this. And last round, we did have some glitches with it. We think we've worked those out, so hopefully it'll be smooth sailing. So you'll see at the top of the slide, it's our website, and it's under forms and regulations. You'll see a link to application form submissions. It's not there yet. We'll put it up sometime in January. Or actually, you know, we might put it up earlier for the supplemental funding requests, because we're asking that everything go through this form now, not just the new applications, but also the supplemental funding requests. So we'll get it up hopefully sooner rather than later. There is a drop-down menu to select the type of application being submitted, and then you fill out the information, the name, email, submit it on behalf of, upload your files, and press submit. So that's easy. And the reason we went to this is people were emailing the digital. We wanted to go paperless, and emails just weren't, they couldn't handle files as large as we needed them to handle with all the mapping and things. Just backing up for a second to the supplemental funding request, I forgot to mention that we strongly suggest that you contact your project manager to go over the supplemental request form. It's you know, it can be a little complicated, and that way you'll get all the information right and before finalizing it. You know, we like to work with you on this stuff, and hopefully, you know, we can do that in a way that helps you help us. Okay, so now we're on the contact us page.
See, we're talking, are you going to be mentioning the old money thing and
No,
capacity?
why don't you do that?
Okay.
Martha?
Okay, so back in October, we sent letters out to applicants that had older balances, or they had, and by that we've been generous, we're saying anything that was pre-2019, or they had more 3 or more projects already open, or they had compliance problems, serious compliance problems, or sometimes a combination of all of those. And we told them that unless those issues were resolved by the next funding round, we would not be accepting applications from them. So everybody who got those letters is already aware of it. But the older funding issue is a big deal. And what made me think about it was, if you're asking for supplemental funding and you have money that you've been sitting on for several years, that goes into whether or not we're going to give you additional funding, because it just doesn't make sense. We're trying to tighten up. We're getting criticism from above about how much money we have available. And every individual project, you can probably explain why it's taking a while, because we know all the easy projects are already done. But in the aggregate, we have tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars that are unspent. And it's really hard to say that every single one of them has a story, because most do, but some don't. And sometimes the stories shouldn't mean that the funding for the acquisition is being held for 6, 7, 8 years. It just doesn't work that way. So as you come in for funding, especially supplemental funding, if you have older balances or too many open projects, we're going to tell you that we're not able to fund more. But again, those are conversations you can have with us on an individual basis, and with your project managers. You're welcome to talk to Cecile or me as well. But we're taking this very seriously, because we have whatever funding is not actively being used, we're going to cancel and then use for the next funding round for people who are ready to move. So it's actually going to be helping to get projects done faster. It may not have been the projects people had expected when they applied 4 years ago, but we need to do this. It's really our responsibility to the public to spend the money quickly. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Martha. Okay, so we've covered a lot of information in a short period of time, and we realize that the application materials do cover most of these topics in detail, and encourage you to check them out. Also, you're welcome to attend the 2 Q&A sessions that Martha mentioned on December 13th and January 17th. And of course, please reach out to your project manager with questions. And you can figure that out by going on our website. Go to the Contact Us button. You can see the red arrow there. And look under local and nonprofit assistance. And I just want to point out that most counties have different project managers who handle acquisition projects versus park development projects. So just make sure you've got the right one. All right, and finally, I just wanted to mention that the group that Green Acres is part of, which, as Martha mentioned, is the Community Investment and Economic Revitalization Group, is doing a survey of local governments and nonprofits to better understand needs, environmental needs and challenges, and how DEP can help you through grants, loans, and other opportunities. So the QR code leads to the survey. And as Martha mentioned, we are going to have this up on our website, this presentation. So if you don't catch it now, you could go there or just search our website for this year's survey. Okay, thank you for coming. And now we'll see any questions and answers. I think I could just jump right in and talk about the rolling over the urban parks into the Green Acres. So urban parks and Green Acres, I explained, are different pots of money. The urban parks, we're trying to spread it out as much as we can, which is why there's a relatively low funding round cap of $500,000. So, and also some applications likely won't be funded or be successful in that round. So we encourage folks, if they want additional money or if they want to sort of cover their bases, to request that the application be rolled over or basically submitted simultaneously to the Green Acres program as well. And that way, if it's like, let's say it's a $1.5 million project, you get $500,000 from urban parks, but you need more. If it's a successful project, you can also ask for additional, you could ask for the $1 million from Green Acres, and maybe it would get both awards. It is as I mentioned, it does count as your Green Acres request. So if you're asking for the same project to be put in both pots, you can't ask for another project to be in Green Acres, in the Green Acres pot. But it is a way to kind of potentially fully fund a more expensive project through those two sources. And I mentioned there were a couple of additional submission requirements. There's a checkbox on the urban parks application. You don't have to submit 2 applications. You just submit the one and check off that you want it rolled over into Green Acres. Nobody wants to submit 2 different applications, and you don't have to for that. So that was Dan. Dan, did that answer your questions? Did you have other questions? You good?
I'm all good, thank you.
Okay.
I do want to mention, this is on to the side, but no subject. If anybody from here is at the League of Municipalities this week, that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the DEP does have a table there. I'll be there. I'm happy to answer any questions you have if you're walking around collecting your fat pens. Feel free to stop by the DEP table and ask us whatever you want. I'm also doing 2 sessions on Green Acres, different aspects of it, because that's another thing to roll out, is that we are going to be redoing our rules. And so it's going to be a big initiative, but it starts with hearing from you about how we're doing. And if there are things that you think we need to change, you will not hurt our feelings. We want to hear from you about things that we'd like, you'd like us to change to make things better. Some things, as Cecile mentioned before, we have certain things are statutory and we don't have room to budge. But other things, if you can, suggest ways that we can make your lives easier and we all get to the same end, we want to hear about that. So we will be having stakeholder meetings, more formal, but at any time you are welcome to write to us and tell us, tell us what's working and what's not working. It's okay. We need to hear it. We are always trying to improve. Okay, so question: it seems nonprofits need to make public notice for an acquisition. If yes, in what media?
Okay, there's a dual notice requirement, and this is laid out in the checklist in pretty good detail. So it has to be posted on your website 2 weeks before, I think it's 14 days, 15 days, 15 days ahead of the submitting your application. And then it has to be posted in a newspaper in the general vicinity of the project site in that's 48 hours ahead of time. So we encourage you to post it earlier, but it just has to be, the requirement is within 48 hours. I mean,
You
not
also-
within, before 48 hours. Sorry.
And you also need to write to notify the clerk of the town in which the project site is located.
Right.
You're letting the municipality know. You're not asking them for permission, you're letting
Yeah.
them know.
Just a heads up.
Okay, more
Other
questions? Come on, Wendy. You put them all in the chat, but I know you must have more. No, you're good? Okay.
Wow, we were just so thorough.
Or confusing.
You know, I
whatever.
talked so long, everyone's asleep.
We cannot stress enough how available we are to answer your questions and talk through projects, possible projects, anything you want. Please give us a call. It really saves you and us a lot of time and trouble at the end, because we don't want you to go down the wrong path of something that it turns out was ineligible.
You know what, I'm going to jump in and just say one thing that I didn't mention before is that for nonprofit applications, starting last round, Wendy, you just perked right up there. Starting last round, we started a new form called the Nonprofit Eligibility Certification Form. And as part of that form, we require printouts from the IRS and from website and from the Charities Registration and Investigation Act website through the Division of Consumer Affairs. So on the state level, the IRS website seems to be pretty up to date. The CRIA website, sometimes there is a delay in getting the information posted. And so what we strongly suggest is to do that part of the application now. You know, get right on that so that if there is a problem, you have time to resolve it. There's information in the application of exactly how to go about that. You know, if you go on the website and it says your nonprofit is non-compliant and you know that it is compliant, there is contact information and instructions for how to go about getting that fixed. So that I just wanted to give a heads up. That's a good thing to get started on now.
Similarly, there's a Cecile mentioned the preliminaries of the planning incentive certification form. You know, we have you do an make sure you have an open space and recreation plan, but very often those plans are more than 10 years old and things change. I'm sure lots of warehouses have been proposed in your town in the most recent years, and you want to update things. So you would not be eligible if your plan is more than 10 years old. I mean, if you're working on a new one, we give you a grace period, but it also is in your best interest to update your plan on a regular basis. So that's also something on the checklist. Amy?
I just wanted to admit we missed one slide, so I'm going to share my screen because it was when I had the technical glitch on my end. But this slide never did appear, so I just wanted to. I know Cece covered it, but
yes,
I just thought I should put it up there.
Yes, thanks, Amy. Yeah, that was the one where I didn't even notice it was there. I was too busy chatting.
So I just want to point out that, so a lot of people asked us last year when we started talking, actually 2 years ago, we were talking about the plan of the urban parks. We're not giving more funding to urban areas to the detriment of the rest of the state. We are doing it all. It's one of the reasons that we're canceling stalled projects, because we want to put the funding to where the projects are going to happen and when they're needed. So it's not like we've stopped doing the preservation of open space for open space sake, for natural resource sake, for resilience and climate change. All of that is very important for the habitat. All of that is still very important. Conservation it's recreation and conservation. But we're trying to also focus more funding and preferential grant funding to the cities that can't really afford the same kind of things that some of the other towns can, and that there are more people, literally just more people who need more open space, and it's a lot more densely populated. So we're trying to put some somewhat preferential funding towards them, but we're still funding all of the rest. I just want to make
and these are the
everybody
same communities that you know, historically have just been dumped on with a lot of, you know, really, you know, not nice environmental things. So that's, you know, we're trying to, in some cases, increase their quality of life after a long time, you know, a long history of citing facilities, NIMBY facilities in these areas. So it's, but Martha's right. We, you know, we are still very much all about our standard municipalities, you know, and our, you know, connectivity and our greenways and all of that is also still very important to us.
So Lisa asked, can nonprofits access the additional 25% if working in an ACS OBC, or are we restricted to 50%? Unfortunately, statutorily, it's just nonprofits are restricted to that, but you could partner with the town that wants to do a project there and, you know, give your expertise, and then they could apply and be the ones that actually get the better grant funding. And I'm not sure if you heard that we do hope to give larger nonprofit awards this year. There are a lot of partnership acquisitions that happen around the state, and we know that they're necessary for different reasons. Sometimes they're more trouble than we think they need to be. So we're hoping that if we give larger awards to nonprofits, that maybe instead of 3 nonprofits each putting in a little bit to 3 projects, each one can take one or something like that. It's trying to limit the number of partners that are needed to make a project happen. So we're hoping to give that larger awards will allow that to happen. We understand that for nonprofits, you have to answer to your donors and you want to be able to say that you've participated in all these things. But unfortunately, it just makes the transaction much more complicated. It makes the project more complicated. We have to worry about all the, you know, the percentage owner interest, the partnership agreements, all those other things. So if we give you larger awards, we're hoping that you can say, we'll do this one on our own and we'll all just celebrate. And, you know, it actually makes everyone's lives easier. You'll have to figure out how to, you know, take credit for the other ones, you know, that you're facilitating, but you don't actually have to be part of the transaction, which would be very helpful. Because we have a couple that are 5 partners or more, and it's just crazy. You know, it's just cutting up the pie in very little small slices. So that's why we're trying to make all the stalled money available to the people who are actually making things happen, and being able to give larger awards. So that's.
And somebody asked for supplemental funding for an existing park project. Is public engagement still required? No, public engagement is for new applications only.
We do encourage you to talk to your residents all the time, and
Right,
hopefully you engaged them when you came in with the project at the beginning, you know, whenever that was. We have some stellar towns who just do this on their own, even if they're not applying for us for funding. We actually see their websites about parks that they're developing, and they're asking people, they're giving surveys, they're offering different things. I mean, maybe you can't do the on-site meetings or whatever, but there are lots of ways with new technology that you can invite the public to tell you what they think is important to them. Any other questions?
Do any of the project managers have anything you guys want to add that you think would be helpful for folks to know that we didn't cover?
Again, we are having a meeting this afternoon about park developments, but a lot of these projects, they tend to go hand in hand, you know, some of the more active projects. And if you're mostly doing acquisition, but you decided you want to do developments, I mean, for the municipalities out there, we're opening a new program for inclusive playgrounds. We're trying to make it not even competitive. A 75% grant for completely inclusive playgrounds for municipalities who in the past were only eligible for loans. We're prioritizing these recreational areas for all able people of all different abilities, adults and children. I mean, children and adults. I mean, there's a great need out there. So we're very excited about that. So if you are mostly doing acquisitions, and you're a municipality that does its own park development, please look into that and consider us for that as well, because that we really want to spread these completely inclusive playgrounds all around the state. So I'm sorry, project managers, if you had anything you wanted to add. Okay. Well, I know with our Q&As, we stay on the line no matter what. So you're welcome to leave if you'd like. I don't think anybody's joining this late in the game for the open houses that we have. Some people join late, so we stay on. But if there are no more questions, you're welcome to go out and enjoy your day, and maybe we'll see you later at the other meeting. If not, we're here for you. Okay, so someone asked a question. I'm sorry if this was addressed, but if a municipality is applying for a project that it has applied for before but was not funded, does that count toward public engagement? That's interesting. Because you had a hearing at the time. Again, I don't know that you were asking them what they thought or what they wanted, as opposed to you just went through the application process. You still have time, though. I mean, you still have time to share it with the public and ask what they think, because maybe the needs have changed since the last time you applied, and they want to give you some input about how, instead of tennis, we want pickleball, or something like that. And you can ask them those questions, and then that's your community engagement. Okay, I lied. Somebody did just join.
I know.
Again, we're not dictating what the community engagement has to be. The application has lots of suggestions, but your constituency, your constituency and how to reach them. So those are just ideas. Okay, any other questions? Lisa, did we answer all your questions? Okay. So this is completely on the side, but assuming that your project gets approved, your funding gets approved, you've done your great work, we do ask you to please notify us and invite us and make mention in the press that Green Acres funded your project, because we are publicly funded and we want to make sure not only to spread the good news, but just to let the public know how their funding is being done. We haven't put it into the contract yet, but we might, to say, if you're doing any public announcements, please mention that Green Acres funding was provided, was used for this, because that does help us in the event that there are future public questions. People can know where our funding is being spent. So I bring that up because NJCF just had an awesome event at their new Rainbow Hill Preserve in Hunterdon County, and it was glorious. And I mean, social media is great about that. And I see on social media where people are saying that because of the announcements about it, they've now gone to start hiking at that preserve and how much they enjoy it. So please share your good news on your websites and through social media, because it's you're reaching a lot of people, and we appreciate the Green Acres mention. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. I don't think we have to keep everybody on. Have a great day. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Bye.